It is 22nd of June, 3:06 p.m. So I kind of want to disregard the thing I said before, because I thought about it and I realized both the alignment of value and ideal and value and reality and ideal and reality can lead to either contentment or happiness. It doesn't matter, because happiness is just a form of contentment, right? And I'm trying to be more post-structuralist and saying, well, I'll come back to it, but I think it doesn't necessarily have to be happiness, which is the goal. But I think when you dig really down to the core, there's still that sort of desire, right? Between what you want or need and trying to reach that when you sort of lack it. Yeah. And so I reconstructed my thought and came to this. I did like a whole diagram to kind of visualize. And I realized there's sort of like 3 degrees to this, where the last degree is the ideal minus reality, which equals to the degree of contentment. And so the first degree is basically, how do we construct value in the first place? Value meaning the something is important. What makes something important to you? And that just comes from a priori and a posteriori knowledge. I can't go to specifics because I think it could be a lot of things. It could be like just experience, some biological need, philosophy, education, norms, etc. Well, they could be a posteriori or a priori, and it's like a combination, weighing differently and all that, but I do believe a posteriori knowledge is more significant compared to a priori. I think a lot of value is more constructed than discovered. So there's value. And then from there, we can see it, and then from there I realized it's a value minus reality that leads to the ideal. Because you want to be something. When you're actualizing value, what you're doing is you're putting value in the realm of reality. So if you want to actualize value, what does it look like? How is it formed in reality? And that's what ideal would be. And so, okay, and then we finally get to the third degree, which is then ideal minus reality. And then that's the tension there leads to the degree of contentment, which I would say contentment reaching sort of like zero, where there's no difference there's barely any difference between ideal and reality, is the telos of life. And that's how I see it. And then I realized there are 4 different approaches to reaching close to zero to the degrees of contentment. and they each reflect sort of, not 100%, but sort of different philosophies. Starting off with the first one, I think the most straightforward is fulfillment approach, saying that you approach this equation by trying to get trying to basically reach the goal, where ideal reality equals 0. That's it. So an example would be, you want to marry, then you strive to find someone you can marry. And I feel that is close to teleology, because it's about sort of actualizing yourself, right? It's completing something that is true to you, sort of. I think that's what teleology is. And it's the idea of there's a process and then there's the end, which is a fulfillment. And so that's the first approach. That is close to teleology. The second approach is the progression approach, or the process approach. Maybe process approach might be a better term. This is saying the ideal. So we have ideal minus reality. I'm also thinking like, should be ideal divided by reality to make symbolically, linguistically, that works kind of better, but I'm just keeping it to subtraction because it's about the difference. But anyways, it's ideal minus reality equals degree of contentment. And then we're saying, okay, the ideal in this case is actually the process of reaching degree of contentment to 0, not the actual fulfillment of contentment to 0. Degree of contentment being 0. It's the process. That's the ideal. So it becomes degree of contentment approaching to 0 minus reality equals degree of contentment. So it basically means you find contentment in actually striving towards some sort of goal rather than actually fulfilling that part. First, I thought this could be maybe described as delusion, because it's more about the verb, right? It's more of the movement in the process rather than more of the goal, the tangible, the object that is the goal, sort of. But I feel it could also be closer to Camus' absurdism, the idea of like, one must see Sisyphus happy. It's about just the striving, the process of rolling the boulder up, which is the ideal. I think I'm not really familiar with Zizek. I think Zizek, I saw a video saying Zizek was talking something about that, so maybe that relates to Zizek as well. So that's the process approach. And then the next one, we go to the meta approach, where instead of just looking at the process, you're looking at the whole equation altogether, of the idea that we have an ideal, we have reality that creates attention, and that equates to some degree of contentment. We accept that as a whole as sort of like the ideal, where the ideal is being replaced by that. So it becomes ideal minus reality equals degree of contentment minus reality equals degree of contentment. It's almost kind of paradoxical. It gets more paradoxical as we go along. I mean, there's one more, but and basically what this is saying is it goes the next step. I don't want to say next step, but it goes even more outside of looking at just the progress or the process, but it's saying just this kind of, it kind of goes beyond the idea of ideal almost, I guess, by just saying it kind of appreciates or loves or accepts that this thing happens, the good and the bad, that there is a tension. It's all part of life. And I feel that is very similar to amor fati, amor fati. That this fate, that you have something you want and there's reality that creates a conflict, and that conflict inevitably is gonna dictate how you kind of feel, and you might be happy, you might be unhappy, less content, whatever, and you kind of accept it all as it is because that's life. It doesn't mean you don't try, you do try, and I think you accept that you fail, or you accept that you succeed, or you accept that there is tension. It's all of that. It's amor fati. And then the last one, so that was a meta approach. The last one is the non-telos approach. So instead of looking at the degree as a whole, now it is looking at the degree as a whole, sort of, or the degree or the equation as a whole, but it's rejecting it. It basically rejects it by saying the ideal is 0. So it becomes 0 minus reality equals degree of contentment, which you go into more than past 0, basically. Or maybe you won't. Maybe reality is also 0 in this case, which I'll get to it. Also, that's why I thought maybe division is better, because it becomes undefined, You can't divide 0. Right? Was it divide by 0, or you can't divide 0? I'm pretty sure you can't divide 0. It becomes undefined. And the idea is to sort of reject having ideals, to not have ideals, there's no ambition, there's no contention, nothing, you just be, you just accept. It's not even accepting, you just are, sort of. There is no tension between reality and the ideal. You sort of transcend that. And that, I thought, really reflects nirvana. But you're detached from desire, basically. And the order I said in goes from the most destructible to the least destructible, meaning at the level of fulfillment, it's easy to lose that quickly, either through achieving it, or you physically sort of lose that fulfillment. Either ways, it's very easy to be destroyed, being in that state of fulfillment. Process kind of less, but I feel that you could still sort of, there's still like tangibility, that's what makes it more destructible. Because you could still find yourself in a position that you're not really experiencing process. What if you're way too stagnant? You could argue that stagnation is part of the process. But I feel that people, or at least subjectively speaking, if you're keen on process, you're aware of how short your life is. If you really don't see any sort of change or process happening, that will definitely create a very low degree of contentment, I would say. Low meaning far away from zero, because there's a lot of difference. And then when you're amor fati, it becomes less, You sort of also accept the stagnation, if there is, because you accept the whole idea of there is a tension, right? And then nirvana, it's basically indestructible because you don't give a shit. Yeah. And then my point isn't really that you're supposed to reach, it does seem like you're supposed to reach to the highest tier of indestructibility, which is non-telos, but this model I have isn't saying you have to go there. That's not, if you want to, you could, but that sort of strive towards non-telos is also a form of ideal. My point is that there's just different approaches you can do. It's up to you. The model doesn't tell you how to do things. A model is more of an observation. That I think there are different approaches, or it's more of like a tool, I would say. That I bet there is a good argument to say this whole thing is bogus, that there's a different perspective. For me, this model seems to sort of encompass a lot of things, and I think it works. I feel like it would work for a lot of people, and does reflect on a lot of pre-established philosophies and ideologies. And the interesting about making this into sort of an equation is that when you really look at it, all of it is technically also teleology. It's all fulfillment, because the idea of reaching zero still exists. Maybe anti-telos is a bit different, but generally speaking, I need to apply lip gloss. Generally speaking, there is still the goal that you're trying to reduce the tension between ideal and reality. Because even looking at the approach or seeing the whole equation and kind of accepting it, both of that is still a form of ideal, And so there could be a difference between that and reality. So basically, with amor fati, it could be that you are not able to stay in a state of amor fati. That would create a tension between that ideal and reality. So in a sense, it's still fulfillment. It's still teleology. But the anti-telos, it's not something that you really have to strive for. It's supposed to be something that you can just, it's always been there for you. Although, ironically, Campbell's Hero's Journey puts it in a teleological sense that you kind of go through this journey to reach that nirvana of sorts. So it's a bit paradoxical, but I think you have to kind of accept paradox in philosophy in some cases, especially if you're more of a post-structuralist, which is the other point of topic, is that, so like two themes right now. I always have like a philosophical theme throughout my days, weeks, months, whatever. It always changes. It's like a season, you know. Right now, this season of philosophy, I am focused on one puer aeternus. It's more, or I would still consider psychoanalysis a form of philosophy. Well, I think a lot of people do. And my point here is when I do something, when I feel something, I look at myself and think, wait, is it the puer aeternus talking? And the thing is, I also have to balance between, you know, being pragmatic and mature and being actionable versus not silencing the puer aeternus too much. I'm trying to strike a balance. So that's one thing. The other thing is really looking at structuralism versus post-structuralism, which I'm both not that familiar with, although I both kind of studied it a bit. And I would say the Joseph Campbell's book I'm reading, and I think you'll notice that it takes a long time for me to read because, well, one, I'm just a slow reader, but I take long breaks in between few pages. I think before this week, the last time I read was like a month ago, I would say. And I also take notes on it, which is additional time, you know. But yeah, so it takes a long time for me to read that, but it's good. I think it helps me digest better. And my point was that that book is definitely more structuralist, right? It's very Oedipusian. No, that does sound right. It does touch upon the Oedipus complex a lot. And psychoanalysis, definitely. And the whole idea of like initiation, the rite of passage, that's very structuralist. And I mean, the whole book is about talking about commonalities between myths from different cultures, you know. So the argument is very universalist. On the other hand, I was talking to my friend several weeks ago, and we were looking at a LinkedIn profile of our high school English teacher, and his PhD was about Deleuzian analysis of film. And then he asked, who even is Deleuze? And I heard of Deleuze a lot. I was supposed to read Deleuze. Oh, that's an interesting insect. It's hard to see. Oh well, it flew away. I was supposed to read Deleuze at one point because I was taking like a class on, I don't remember the name, something about neoliberalism. And then Deleuze was something I was supposed to read. I didn't read. I don't think I read. And in media philosophy, I came across a different philosopher, but he was heavily influenced by Deleuze. So I did have some very tiny familiarity with Deleuze. But then I thought, okay, actually, you know what? I don't know Deleuze. I want to actually check him out. And I haven't read really his works. I read maybe some notes here and there on Google. I've seen some videos, these people explaining. I think they really talk about anti-Oedipus. And I thought, oh wow, this post-structuralism is really the sort of ideas I had. And I can see that because I'm pretty sure a lot of my ideas are also influenced by what I studied. And that was, a lot of it was definitely influenced by post-structuralism. I think especially media philosophy, I want to say. Or that I sometimes feel like a lot of avant-garde, like I studied art as well, and avant-gardism seems pretty post-structuralist as well. It's trying to defy convention, you know. So anyways, when I started watching these videos about Deleuze and Guattari, I thought, oh, okay, I really agree with a lot of the things they say. Because, I mean, I am a way more relativist. Although, I don't want to say I'm a relativist simply because of what I studied. Because a lot of it, I feel, is influenced also by my, like, my rejection of religion. And also, when I took truffles, I was like, oh, nothing has inherent quality, which equates to there's no such, which equates to going against essentialism. And that's a lot of also what post-structuralism, especially Deleuze and Guattari, from what I understand, is about. It puts movement and process in front of essence, right? And a lot of their argument is that like psychoanalysis or Hegelian work is not, or they critiqued it because these ideas were universalist, saying there is a fundamental commonality amongst people in society, and Deleuze and Guattari was like, no, that's not true. We are way more complex than simply the dialectics, or that there are different ways of process, which doesn't really always, almost never actually strive through a conventional like teleological process. There's not even like teleology something, because it's about the rhizomes, right? Just kind of chaotically spreading out, and it doesn't build much structure, but that's sort of the chaos of life. And what else? Yeah, that the idea is there's less, maybe they don't really touch on determinism, but it almost seems like less deterministic of describing human nature, or less, it's way more complex. Maybe they don't go against determinism, but their point is more about it's complex, that the human condition is complex. And I completely agree. But I had thought about, okay, but I don't think structuralism is completely wrong in two forms. In one form, I think structuralism functions more as a symbolic tool that underneath all the symbols we live with is barren. There's nothing. But we can construct these structures, either through repetition or like giving it power in some form. And those symbols actually become important to us, have meaning. We could, and it kind of works. And that's how I guess society works, right? That symbols kind of work. So I can see the structuralist ideas can still be relevant. There are symbolic tools. I mean, Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey. It's not every story goes through that process, right? And I think a lot of the psychoanalytical part maybe doesn't really apply to people. But at the same time, what I'm reading, I feel that it could be a very useful tool. And I'm just going to pick and choose what I want to use for my own tool. And then my other point going for structuralism is that sure, maybe it's barren, post-structuralism. To me, post-structuralism is also almost like religion or mythology, that it's like an explanation in the face of not being able to understand because of our lack of technological advancement, that we just don't have the technology to really capture the mind and how all these minds interact. It's way too complex for us to really scientifically capture, And so we can say there is no real empirical structure. But then if we eventually advance our technology, I feel like AI, the way information it can algorithmically integrate a lot of information and discover a pattern. I feel like that might be a key to really uncovering the fundamental objective, scientific, empirical, I would say, empirical understanding of the human condition. And then we would realize, we would kind of go back to structuralism and so reject post-structuralism. But then at the same time, post-structuralism isn't necessarily that, right? It's still, it's still pretty logical, empirical. So it could be that we do discover sort of the deterministic aspect of humans. But maybe what we discover is that it's still just complex. Like, it's deterministic, but the outcomes are so, the number of outcomes are so vast and diverse that it sort of subsides the anxiety of you being deterministic, that there's just so many options that it really doesn't matter, that it's still complex either ways. And so post-structuralism is right, sort of. So but then the post-structuralism is almost like the new structure. I guess maybe that's why it's post-structuralism and not anti-structuralism. Maybe that's the point. That it's still kind of fundamentalist. I don't know if that's the right term. Like it's almost essentialist still. The essence being that it's way more complicated to just say its essence, what the essence is. I think I'm getting tired, but that's sort of the point I'm at right now. That the of Poor Eternus that briefly touched, but more so my internal debate between structuralism and post-structuralism. I think at the end of the day, it's a bit of both, right? Like what I touched on, the telos of life. The value begins with not just a posteriori, but also a priori. I believe there is some element of a priori. There is innate biological understanding of something. For example, when we perceive something, we understand that, or like when we visually perceive something, we understand that it is a visual perception, even if our eye is sort of a medium that distorts what's really out there, probably, and how we integrate the information. That, I don't know, that point doesn't really matter, but I think the point here is that we understand there is that innately tactileness, like the sense of hunger, all this idea. I think we do have some sort of innate understanding of some things. So yeah, it's a bit of both. I think I'm an agonist, structural agonist, if that's a term. And also, I guess how I see philosophy is more like a buffet, Not one thing is right. You can just pick and choose what you want for that day, whatever works for you. Although I'm worried because this